Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I'm so excited to bring you today's guest, especially because we've had some technical difficulties and she's been so um, generous with her time and working to figure all this out. So please welcome Molly Ringle. There she is. Hi.
Hi,
How are
Pam.
you?
You've been very patient as well. There's a lot we cannot figure out with IT, but maybe this will work.
Well, and I feel like we're all having opportunities to stretch our comfort zones in all of this pandemic and Zoom and everything. So
Yeah,
so there we go.
learning new things.
Are you, I always come in with like exactly how I'm going to start my interviews, and then I think of something as we. So I'm going to start with a different thing. What is how's your writing going in the pandemic? Because it's
Yeah,
challenging.
it started out like the beginning of the pandemic. It was still fine because I was in the middle of a book. And so I had the good momentum going, and I was like, this is cool. I know what I'm going to do. I can just be at home and write, and it's fine. And then I finished that one. And now I'm stuck with trying to come up with the idea for the next one and what exactly it should look like. And that's not going as fast or as inspired as it sometimes has in the past, I must admit. So yeah,
Yeah.
I finally got to where probably most writers got to several months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it.
Well, let's back up now because I just had to get that out of the way. But let's back up and talk about who you are. You're an author. You have about a dozen books out, and you have one coming out in January, and then another coming out in May. That you already, I have to say, you already have your blurb written for your May your book coming out in May, and that's the hardest part. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's just already on top of it. Do you write those, or does someone else write those for you, or
I do write the blurbs. I don't mind writing blurbs. Synopsis, I hate writing a synopsis. Like write a 2-page synopsis, or I'm like, oh, I make it sound so boring. But I can usually do a back cover blurb, okay. And I over the years, I have finally figured out to start thinking about the blurb even before the book's done, and how would I describe it. And I keep a file of, all right, here's the 1 sentence blurb, here's the back cover blurb, here's whatever else I might need. But yeah, if it's a synopsis though,
it's so hard.
I can't do that.
I feel like blurbs are like online dating profiles for books. And those are so hard. Like just an online dating profile is like, how do you sum your entire self up? And then how do you sum your entire book up, whether for a synopsis or a blurb? But you have it down. How do you do it?
Thank you. I'm glad it seems that way. I don't know. I think about what I find interesting in other book blurbs that I read. Like if there are too many character names, for instance, if they're introducing 6 characters on the back of the book, then I start getting confused. And so I feel like you shouldn't introduce more than about 2, maybe 3 by name. And also, obviously, you don't give away too much of it. You leave it open
Yes.
ended, but you have to also give it a mood. So if it's a romance, you make it clear that it's a romance, or if it's mainly a mystery, that should be clear too. And yeah, concrete details help rather than like things become mysterious and difficult. You'd say, they must go on a quest into this particular place, and people are like,
Yeah.
so yeah, specifics, but not too many is a good rule, probably.
I think it's especially hard on mysteries because, I write murder mysteries. And
Yeah.
I'm always like, well, I don't want to give that away. And I can't say that. And I don't want to say, you want to say that there's 2 people who died, or you don't want to say, this a
Yes.
man or a woman died. You just want it all to be, unless the death happens right at the beginning. But other than that, you don't want to give anything away. So it's so hard.
Yeah, and you probably don't want to suggest to them who they should suspect
Right? Like,
or anything at all.
totally
Yeah.
wasn't the butler who did it.
Would it be the really shifty guy you're obviously supposed to suspect?
Right, right. Or definitely
Yeah.
not. Okay, well, let's back up again because I love your origin story for your becoming a writer. So talk to me about how your first foray into writing.
I mean, there were little things like that. I would try writing a newsletter for our house or something like that when I was, I don't know, 10. And there wasn't a lot going on at our house, you may expect. I think that at some point I made things up. And we pretended, millionaire so-and-so is in town. So, but then at some point, yeah, I decided to write an actual novella. It turned into a novella based on a true story of this very mean girl thing that happened in middle school. And so I had to write it all down, and it was ridiculous. And I'm sure it wasn't written very well, but it was a story from start to finish with several characters, and that was really fun. And my sister and friends who were also in it, because it was a true
Yeah.
story, they liked reading it, so that probably got me encouraged to keep making things up in stories with them in it at first, and then eventually I moved into original characters. So yeah, that was my beginning.
Do you know, that's an interesting point, because I feel like, when I first started writing my first story, the hardest thing for me was creating characters. And I finally ended up writing stories with characters I already knew. And I do feel like that
Mhm.
I wouldn't have been able to do it without kind of taking incremental steps. And so to hear you say that is interesting, that you did start with people you knew too. What do you think you learned?
Literally those people.
How did you, like, what was the progression? How did you gain the skill and confidence based on that progression?
I mean, I feel like I still kind of base it on real people. They're not necessarily people I know. They might be a character in a movie or a book that I'm really obsessed with, and I think, what is it I like about them? Or I often need a picture, at least, of some person I find online. Doesn't even have to be someone I know who they are. Just if they look right to me, they'll be like, okay, now I'm inspired, and I can see that maybe I'm a visual person. But because then if I can see them, I can start imagining them being
Oops, oops, we froze. Are we still there?
and it
Okay, we're good.
being all chopping a little there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
it was unstable.
So you were just
But
saying,
yeah,
if you can see
it
them,
still helps to picture a real person.
yeah. Do you sometimes imagine, like, when you're kind of stuck, like, okay, well, what would this person that I'm basing them on, or who inspired me, what would they do? Because I do that sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And and I do those cheesy like character interviews or character resume worksheets once in a while, at least at the beginning, to figure out, okay, is this the kind of person who fears being alone or fears being with people, or what are their strengths and weaknesses, and what's going to be their fatal flaw, and all of that they have to get over by the end of the book, at least temporarily. Things like that are kind of important. But then yeah, it often takes a good half a book or so before they really feel like they're alive, and then I can go back and fix the first half.
And you don't write a
Yeah.
lot of series. You write a lot of standalone books, because I feel like in series, it gives you that benefit that, okay, now I know my characters, I can just jump into the story, but you make it hard on yourself every time.
Kind of, because I don't know, when I wrote the one series I have is a trilogy. Oh, whoa. Sorry. And the I found it, well, like, it was really easy to write the second book because I knew what was going to happen, but the third book was like the hardest thing ever because I had to tie everything up,
Yeah.
and that was so hard. So maybe it's hard to end a series. But yeah, knowing the characters was a plus. But on the other hand, I really didn't like the pressure of dealing with how complex it was to have a whole trilogy's worth of information, and to try to figure out how to tie it up in a satisfying way and make each book a satisfying volume in itself. So I kind of was scared off of proper series after that. But I might do the kind of series, like, I think mystery series do this other way a lot, where they do stand alone individually. You don't
Yeah.
really have to read them in sequence. It may help a little, but
Yeah.
where you can basically use the same world. So you did the world building and you did some of the character work, but you can just give them a whole new situation and adventure each time. So I might do that now that I've created this island world. I might put more books there with different characters or something.
Yes, and we're going to get to your island world, because I'm so interested in talking about your creation of that island. But let's do a little more background first. So, when
Yes.
did you wrote your first story with all the drama from your family? When did you, and friends? When did you decide? This is my path. This is what I want to do. And when did you write your first, like, this is a book I'm going to write as a book I want to put out in the world?
Gosh, I feel like I've thought I want to be a writer I don't know, since at least I was 12 or 13. And I think at the time it probably wasn't a realistic thing to think, but I sort of latched onto it and I stuck with that, which doesn't make any sense because then I majored in anthropology and then linguistics, and I didn't even like major in English or creative writing. But
That,
but yeah, I did want that. And I think it was sometime in high school, I had enough of an attempt at a novel that was original characters mostly that I thought I should try to get this published. And of course, that was the late 80s or early 90s. So first of all, I'm sure the book wasn't good enough to get published, but you had to actually physically mail it in
right.
a box because it was a printout, to somebody in New York and wait 8 weeks or whatever, at least for a rejection letter
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
mail.
If that ever came, right?
Yeah, like wow, it's so much easier now
So
to
much.
get rejected. But
Yeah, I remember
so yeah, it
I'd sent out
goes way
those.
back.
It was a while back, but it wasn't even that long ago. Because I sent my first book out in 2010, and I remember printing out 400 pages and sending it off
Yeah.
in this box. And that was only 10 years ago. It seems like
Wow. So
writing,
this still
when I read your writing, it seems like it comes so easy to you. Because, and I'm sure that's from the outside, but tell me about, like, does it feel easy? Are you just sort of channeling things and it's all come to you and you're just this muse magic person, or does it just look easy when you do it?
it's certainly not always easy. There's usually a lot of pre-planning, so that helps it be easier, I think. And not everyone agrees with that, but I don't stick exactly to my plan anyway. There's room for inspiration along the way. But there
Oops. Did we lose you again?
about what's going to happen.
Okay, we're back.
And then there are days when it's yeah, there are certainly days where it's a word, another word, another word. And look at it like, but eventually I'm usually glad that I wrote those 2 sentences that day or whatever, and it adds up. And then in the editing phase, it's usually not as bad as I thought it was when I look it over, so it can be fixed.
What is your process for writing? Like start to finish, and I hate this question myself, so you can use it to go whichever direction you want. But like, how do you come up with an idea? How do you start writing? Do you plot? Do you not plot? Do you just tell me what you can tell me on a global and then also
tried it many ways.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I have tried it. I think I used to be less of a plotter. I used to just be like, have an idea that's sort of half formed and try it and start writing. And that would be, of course, when I would get stuck a third of the way in or something and be like, I don't know where I'm going with this. And it would get abandoned for several years, and maybe I'd pick it up again. But eventually I learned it probably made more sense to sort of outline it, not with actual Roman numerals, but as a sort of word file in which I write down the story in short and give myself random notes and ideas in parentheses.
Yeah.
And usually then I'll shape that up so that I know where it's going. And that does work better on the whole. Then I'm not as stuck as often, or at least I know what general things to fix and what's going to happen if I unravel one piece, because I know where it's supposed to end. So yeah, I've kind of come over to the side of being for the plotters. if you want to save yourself a lot of time, it's not that you can't do it by the seat of your pants and by discovery writing. You can, but you'll probably spend a lot more time revising later.
Yeah.
Like a lot more.
I'm just realizing, am I on my screen twice? Oops. Cancel.
Not on my screen.
I know, but I'm wondering if I am on the recording. If I'm on the recording twice, that's awkward. Then they'll see all the things I'm doing. All right. We'll do that. Nope, we won't do that. Okay. So that was going to be weird because I think when I put things over. So, but that goes, I was thinking about how much trouble we've had with this whole conversation. I was thinking, one of the things that's important to me is the messy beginning and people seeing that it's not just first time you do something, you do it right, And because
I fall for that. Yeah, and I fall for that too. Like I read some novel and I'm like, this is just amazing. They just like literally put this out there and they're just inherently talented and this just happened. Though really, if I think about it logically, I know that that's probably not how they wrote it. They probably had a clunky, messy first draft and went over it and over it and over it and refined it into this amazing thing.
Yeah.
So probably important that we all remember that.
Yeah. And it's kind of, you don't always want people to see your messy first draft or whatever, but it's important, I think, for people to know that it's part of the process. And I'm sort of embracing the idea of letting people see it, because my choices are either to have all these interviews that don't go anywhere, which is, not a good use of all your time and all my other guests' time, or I put them out there. And the fact that I have a little mini me on the screen that now is gone, it's all part of learning how it works. But I think that that's so important in writing, because you have to keep at it before you're any good.
Yeah, lots and lots of it. I mean, there are so many. All those books I wrote, or I don't know if there was lots of them, but the things I tried writing in high school and pretty much all of college for that matter, I don't think any of that is all that salvageable. And there are probably tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of words worth of novel there. So that was a lot of practice, and that's good. But it's not like I wrote my first novel and it's ready.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I didn't. My first 5 novels were not ready.
How many have you written that have not been published?
It's a little bit hard to say, because there were some that were like early versions of ones that are now published, but they were certainly massively different.
Yeah.
So there's a few like that. But there are, there's a couple at least that I never did anything with. They're pretty much complete books, but at least there might be at least 3 of those in the files that I think I'm not going to do anything with that. It's a complete novel and I'm not going to publish it because I feel like it has too many problems and I don't care enough about fixing it now.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you kind of get to well, that was my idea then, and I was passionate about it then, but I'm over it, and I don't feel like editing it because I'm over it.
Yeah, you should only ever write what you're really into right now.
Yeah.
I mean, no one else is going to care that much. So do what you want to do. Yeah.
Well, and I want to talk now about, because all your years of writing and practice, and this new book here, I'm going to put up the covers on the left here is Lava Red, Feather Blue. That's the cover. And then these are also her Molly's books, Persephone's Orchard, Underwater's Daughter, and Immortal Spring, the trilogy. And I'm a little worried that my voice isn't loud enough. So Lava Red, Feather Blue. Let's come back to the view of us on the screen. There we are. It feels so much more complicated, complex, intricate than any of your previous books. And you have lovely books. They're all excellent. But this one feels like a different level. And so let's first of all, it's an epic fantasy that takes place on an island that's part of Earth, but you can only see it if you're there and it's only visible, blah, blah. So which is a brilliant way of why have I never heard of this place?
It's the place I want to escape to, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Let's all go there now. And it's an epic fantasy that spans a couple of centuries. And I'm not the blurb writer, so I'll let you why don't you describe it a little bit more, but then let's talk about this book because it's really so good.
Oh, thank you. It's the first time I tried creating an entire fictional country. It's probably thus the complexity. And it is in our world, so I don't know if it counts as, I think we've been calling it urban fantasy sometimes because technically it kind of interacts with the rest of Earth a little. But it's basically it all takes place on this one island that no one on actual Earth has ever been to. So it's basically a fantasy. And it's the Fae just used to be the only ones who lived there. And then settlers did happen upon the island, human settlers, over the centuries. And so they were allowed to live there too. And so there's kind of this tenuous piece in place between the Fae and the humans. But it can be tipped over if the wrong things are done. And of course they are in the story. And that has to be fixed so that the harmony is restored. And it involves a Sleeping Beauty type of curse that one of the royals was under long ago, except I made it a prince instead of a princess because ultimately it's a guy love story.
Yeah.
So that's yet another feature that you can hashtag it under.
Right.
But yeah, that's sort of the blurb on the back.
And how long had you been thinking about this story, and how long did it take you to plot it out? Because it's so interwoven and intricate. I'm just really curious if you just like wrote it, or how did that work?
No, it was, yeah, there was a lot of figuring out how the magic worked and, right, okay, what can the people do? What can the Fae do? What is their society like? Because you don't want to just default to like, well, I'll make it basically like our society. No, the point of me writing this story was that I didn't want to set something in the US right now because I started writing it in early 2017. So who knows, for some reason, I didn't really want to set a book in the US anymore. And I thought, there's that sort of vague idea I had a while back about making a different country that was on an island off in the Pacific. Maybe I should do that now. And so I cavalierly started and then realized there's so much to figure out about yet another country.
Yeah.
Kind of started throwing together the thoughts, and then I'd get stuck every few paces because I'd be like, wait, is that illegal here? Why would that be illegal here? What are they? Okay, actually, do they use these titles? What kind of? There were so many little things, and I still don't know all the answers. I just tried to be vague enough if I didn't know the answers. So there's much yet to figure out about the island, I dare say, and probably plenty of things about the magic that don't entirely make sense internally, even because magic is hard that way. We've all picked apart Harry Potter going, okay, if you can do that, then why don't they just, yeah.
Why didn't you just save everything? I feel like
you have that. Okay, the time turner is way too powerful. We can all agree.
I'm just realizing I'm not sure that my screen, okay, it's I think we're good. So did you draw a map of your island so that you had it in your head?
I sketched one that it looks terrible and it's in pencil with scribblings and things, and it's just stuck on my wall by the desk. But luckily my publisher didn't ask for a map for this novel because I don't think I could have drawn a pretty one.
Yeah.
And anyway, I don't really want to lock myself into a definite map yet, because if I write future stories on this island, I might end up wanting to change exactly where a city is or something like that.
Have you,
I don't need that to be down here.
have you always, in your other books, they've always, I can think of Edinburgh. I mean, have they all been in actual cities or actual places?
Yeah, unless you count kind of the other realm type aspects, like the underworld of the Greek mythology. And but even then it was based in mythology, sort of.
Yeah.
I took many liberties and invented things, but it was Greece, and I looked up actual sites in ancient Bronze Age Mediterranean, and it was in the Pacific Northwest. Other than that, there's a lot of Pacific Northwest or the UK, or in that case, Greece. So this is the first totally new land. Yes.
So let's talk about Fae, because I told you that I needed to know a better understanding of all of this. Fae, F-A-E, fairy, F-A-E-R-Y, fairy, F-A-I-R-Y. What's the difference between all of these? And is there a difference?
I mean, there's not a huge difference. It was more that I had to choose something.
Yeah.
And I think I went with F-A-E-R-Y, partly because that's what Brian Froud does. He's got this famous book, Fairies, by Brian Froud, which is gorgeous and is kind of my idea of how fairies actually look, because he makes them look like twigs and interesting things and flowers. So, him, and actually this book was like him and Alan Lee, who did some of the Lord of the Rings drawings too.
Okay.
But yeah, Froud spells it that way.
Okay.
And I liked that because then it differentiated it a little bit from like Disney fairies or the Victorian fairies, which is usually, those are a little bit sweetened down and made very nice. And if you look in the legends, the folklore about them, they're not always that nice. In fact, sometimes they're quite dangerous. So I wanted to use that aspect because that makes for better stories, obviously.
And did you there's like the whole set of rules and names and kinds of
Mhm.
characters and so on. Is everything that you wrote about, because I don't read a whole lot of that kind of book, that genre, so I don't know as much about like which, fairies always can do this and which characters can always do that. And like, did you have to follow sort of a set um, a set of rules that are already out there?
The
Or
fairy lore. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of fairy lore that is usually in books about fairies, like that they hate iron is very common, or that you should not eat their food because bad things will happen to you. Those are really, really common rules, and I felt it was good to stick to those. Other ones, yeah, similar to like if you're writing about vampires, you can kind of decide for yourself whether they actually can die from a stake to the heart or if it takes something else. But usually they can't go out in the sunlight. It would be weird if they could. I hear there's one where they could go out in the sunlight. It's just that they were sparkly, and apparently that didn't go over so well with people because that rule was too much to change.
and that's the thing, but that book didn't do poorly, or those books.
I know. I mean, it worked
Yeah,
actually, but that is a detail that a lot of people went, ah, come on,
right.
because it was too different. But yeah, I mean, I did totally make up some varieties, or at least they were inspired by some random mention on somebody's folklore page that I don't know where they got it. So
Yeah,
it's I made up some of the things that they can do, and I decided on the 4 element system to basically categorize them:
yeah.
fire, earth, air, or water for most of them. But that's not necessarily how everyone puts them. So yeah, there's certain decisions that I made that this is how it works here.
Because when you talk about people not liking the vampire going out in the sun, I mean, there is a backlash if you go against the common accepted, even because like I write mystery, but I can't call them cozy mystery, because if you call them cozy mystery, then people are like, well, it's not a cozy mystery, and then they give you a 1 star. It's like, well, but did you like the book, or did you just not like the fact that it wasn't exactly what you expected? So
I would have said yours were on the cozy, basically cozy mysteries, but maybe I don't know either. I guess I don't read enough of them to know for sure what they mean by that.
yeah, well, it's part of it is like Agatha Christie technically is cozy, but
Yeah,
these days cozies are more often like the chick lit of mysteries, like they're expecting that kind of feel. And that's not what mine are. So
yours is like proper commercial fiction. Yeah,
that's right.
an actual story,
So
and it doesn't involve knitting as a central theme necessarily.
right. I mean, and that's really
So cats,
expected. Cats or knitting or something.
cats and knitting and
Or
cooking. Yeah,
I do have a
baking.
library, but it's probably not as library based as people want it to be. So
I
when
mean,
you were thinking of,
all writers, we all want to include a library.
but don't we all want to include it in a magic library of some sort? Because
Yeah,
you can
of course I want to do that.
dive into the books. Um,
Yeah.
what made you think of this idea for Lava Red Feather Blue? Where did this spark come from?
Uh, I think I kind of crammed together a couple ideas where one was just this general idea that at some point I would like to make up a country that's, and I'll make it an island off of somewhere off of North America, because we don't ever get them put out there when people make up fictional countries. They're always in Europe or something, and we should have one. But and then also, I guess I liked the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale, and I sort of wanted to redo that somehow. So then I crammed those things together and did some gender flipping with it. Well, not flipping actually. I just changed them to being both guys. But and then decided what is the conflict then? What's going to happen? And then I really had to think about it, what I wanted to be going on this island, and decided to use Fae again because people really liked that part of the Goblins of Bellwater, one of my other novels previous.
Also,
It seemed like the major feedback on that was that they wanted to see more of the goblins and the fae, and like, less of the romance, more of the goblins and the fae.
romance.
Oh well, I can go there.
And there's an epic quest that we have, but I was trying to decide, is it the hero's journey or not? And I couldn't decide. Yeah, I mean it is, but it's also not, because like it's not. Well, you tell me what you think and what you intended.
I mean, yeah, yes, in a way, because it's got them. something goes wrong with their world, the call to adventure, they cross into the other world and come back to their world with having basically saved it. And yet, in a way, they also started the problem themselves in
Right.
the first place. So,
It's a new.
I don't know, but I kind of think that that makes it better because then it's your own problem that you're dealing with. I think it's more interesting if you started the problem that you have to fix.
And relatable. I mean,
Yes.
for
Yes, very relatable. Just like, I wasn't trying to do anything wrong, and apparently I ruined
thing.
the world.
So talk to me about writing. I don't know if it's a battle scene, but you have a conflict scene, and I'm not. Those are challenging. So tell me about writing battles and like how, because I just sort of want to go to be like they fought and it's over. Next scene.
Mhm.
Like how do you write one of those?
No, I do not really like action fight sequences. Even if I'm watching or reading something, I assume there's plenty of people where that's their favorite part, but I don't like I kind of don't care that much about them.
Yes.
So I have to figure out a way to either avoid having to write them based on what the plot is like. And if I can't entirely avoid them, then try at least to make them emotionally interesting enough where there's enough at stake as a person, not just we have to defeat the bad guy because they're the bad guy or something like that. Or better yet, if they can fight with each other, if the good guys can fight with each other, that's really fun because that is really emotional and interpersonal then. And that's the part that I find interesting. But now actual fight choreography or weaponry, I don't know very much about that. So I can only wait for people to tell me how ridiculous that was. But at least magic was involved, so I can always say, well, yeah, but magic.
Right. It's just a miracle. It's just if it happens. So what was the hardest thing to write in, without giving away spoilers, but like what kind of thing is the hardest in this book to write?
Yeah. I usually struggle with the first third or so of a book because I want to set things up for too long.
Yeah.
And I've realized this about myself, and believe it or not, I actually trimmed it down from what it was in that book. And I feel like, but if you don't know lots and lots more about their life, you won't care about the rest of the story and what happens to them. But I realized that's no, people manage to write stories in which things get going and you still do care. So I always have to get myself to get things moving faster in terms of the plot, but also then figure out a way to work the details about who they are and what the world is like into that, and hopefully not as info dump or stopping everything for a flashback monologue, which
Yeah.
I probably am guilty of anyway once in a while. But yeah,
But
it's a bad habit.
you can always cut it. I mean, it's easier to write it and then cut it than to like suppress the urge to write it sometimes, because sometimes you're like I just really wanted, and then you're like, oh, it didn't work, I can cut that.
Yeah, cutting is way easier,
So easy.
obviously. That's just the way to do it.
20,000
It's
words, come
satisfying.
on.
It's so satisfying too, isn't it, when you look at the word count at the beginning of your edit and by the end you're like, I have cut 5,000 words
Right.
just through the like cutting the word just
Yes.
and well and that.
My
Yeah.
gosh, I'm trying to get. I may or I don't know if I'm going to be able to get him, but there's a guy who's a body language expert, and I'm trying to get him to come and talk with me because I want him to give me alternatives for nodded and shrugged. I'm like, what else do
Yes.
people do when they're agreeing
Right.
or they don't know something? Like, tell me something, because all my characters like he nodded, she nodded, he smiled, she looked, they looked, I looked, they looked again.
And a sigh. Sighed. I have to put it on my list. Look through for sighs. Cut the sighs.
Yeah,
Smile and laugh too. I want him to do that a little too often, probably.
yeah. So
Usually cut half of those.
half of those, yeah. So you
Yeah,
started this book when in 2017. You
I
make a
think so. Yeah,
you make a
started
conscious
thinking.
choice in your books to not be um, cliche. I would say. Would you agree? Like you explore interesting
I
ideas.
assume so because usually what people say is like, "This is kind of strange," or it's like, "This is unlike other books I have read," and I take that as a compliment because that's I wouldn't want to just be a cookie cutter book, so that's fine. But yeah, and I like to mix things up, and I think I like it when other books and films and things do something that's different, for goodness sake. At least if I still like it to be charming and engaging and have good character development, but yeah, I don't usually want a total cookie cutter type of story. So I usually do end up mixing together a few different types of stories for some bizarre final result.
So, do you think that that hampers your ability to, I mean, and I'm not one to talk,
Market.
I write in so many genres, but I'm curious what you think about writing in a variety. Does that hamper your fan base because they're like, I don't, who is she this time? Like, I don't, is it,
I don't know.
I don't want to give any of your other stories away, but if you want to, you can.
I don't even know if I have a proper fan base who follows for any one thing. So I don't know. Yeah, I generally say that sometimes I write contemporary real world and sometimes I write paranormal. So that's just what you're going to know.
Yeah,
And there's pretty much always a love story. And there's pretty much always at least some humor. Those are the consistent elements. But yes, other than that, it might be very real or very not real.
so what is it about writing that, why do you write? What do you like about writing?
I mean, it keeps me sane. It seems to me that I am
Does
happier
it?
when I'm
Oh,
working on a
does it?
story.
Just-
And I'm not sure why that should be, except that it's the world that I can control. And by now I know that it's not like it's making me rich, and thus this is why I'm doing it. That maybe someday, who knows? But that's not it. And it's not necessarily reviews, because those are few and far between, and people may or may not ever tell you if they liked your book. So yeah, it's the actual writing part that's the part I like, and that's, I guess, yeah, creating a world and getting to control it, getting to have huge drama, but without any actual repercussions in my life is satisfying somehow. Maybe that's it. It's the proxy living.
proxy living your own. We hear often people say that if you like your own writing, you're not a true writer. What do you think of that? I have an opinion. What do you think?
That's a weird statement. I don't know about that. I think it's certainly true that once you've been working on the same book for a long time,
Yeah,
you're going to look at it eventually after the 18th read through and be like, what does this even
right. I hate
say? I
this
don't
book.
even. But usually, if I've put it away for months, like if I pick up one of my books that I wrote years ago and start reading a part of it, I think this seems about like the kind of thing I would like to read, which is a good sign. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that.
By then, I've gotten distance and I see that it's not too bad, and that's really reassuring. At least by my evaluation, it's not too bad. So yeah, I come down on the side of you should probably like your own writing. I'm not sure what you're doing if you don't. But I also understand getting so tired of seeing it that you don't know what it looks like anymore, and you don't know if it's good when you're in the process of it. That happens, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I always am like in editing, I'm like, I hate this book. I'm so over this book. I just want to start writing the next one. But I think that the idea that you have to hate anything about yourself, whether it's you or your creations, like I just don't buy into that. I think that you can you can love your stories and also know that they're not perfect, just like you can love yourself and know that you're not perfect. Or like it's okay to like your book, your writing, and I just want people to not buy into that idea that in order to be considered good, you have to hate yourself or hate your work. I just think
Mhm.
that's so um,
No,
not good.
agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my not good. I think
Even
like this.
even when they go with the kill your darlings idea, I think that's only sometimes true.
Yeah,
It's you have to have the evaluation skills to look at your favorite darling scene and say, does it actually need to be here for a plot reason? But there's a good enough chance that it does, and you can still love that scene and have it be your absolute favorite, and you don't have to kill it just because you love that scene. So don't take that one too literally, as some people seem to. Like if you, or there's some quote from someone that's like that, like if you find a particularly fine passage in your writing, strike it out. Right? Well, I don't know that that's true every time.
have you ever made yourself cry while you were writing?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I have. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those touching scenes, emotional, yes. I'm trying to remember which ones necessarily. Sometimes it's like actually not the death scenes or something. It's more like a child is born or whatever. Like, the emotion. it's little things. Although sometimes reading it over later, I'll be like, oh, that's really moving. And I don't know if I felt that when writing it. I was just in the moment, but
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
So I'm trying to remember, have you ever killed a character? I mean, you've
Yeah.
killed,
Um, More so in the Persephone series because I eventually realized that if you're going to deal with a place where you can go to the underworld and see the souls of the dead, it's pretty cowardly to not kill any of your characters. So I definitely did then. And also, it had already been established pretty early on that the modern people were reincarnations of the old, almost immortals, which meant that at some point they must have died. So I had to eventually come up with ways that they all died. So yeah, there were actually a lot in that one.
I'm putting your book covers back up on screen for people. She's talking about these 3 books on there right here: Persephone's Orchard,
Yeah.
Underworld's Daughter, and Immortal Spring.
I'm
And
trying to remember if there were other like main characters. I usually don't do a lot of killing of main characters. Yeah, but
I
I
saw,
guess in without spoilers, I guess a little bit in Love Red Feather Blue, right?
right, yeah,
But
I saw someone posted something about, do authors, when they kill off characters, sit there and laugh? Like, I was like,
right, like "Mwahaha."
oh,
Maybe George R. R. Martin does, but
maybe.
that's just a typical day for him. So
Yeah, like if I haven't killed 12 people by noon, what am I doing?
yeah, slacking off here.
Yeah. So let's go back to Lava Red, Feather Blue. What do you hope people, because I feel like you have a lot of messages in your books too. And I don't know if that's intentional or if it's sort of a subtle like nod like all my characters nod all the time. A subtle nod at um or not so subtle nod at things you want to get across. I mean, for example, you like you said, it's a guy love story. You have a they character who is a they instead of a he or a she. Like, um, so but you're also not making a big deal out of these things, and so it's sort of like here's something that is just part of this world. So deal with it. Like, how do you
Yeah.
talk to me about that?
Yeah, that one, I think originally I did have a few more things like labels about like I don't think now in Love Red Feather Blue there are any actual labels. Like no one actually says gay or
I don't
bi
think
or
so.
anything, I don't think. And I think I even took off anything that was like Mr. or Mrs. There aren't even titles like or sir or ma'am. But in earlier drafts there were things like that until I started trying and talking to other people about it and going, if I wanted to make a world that looked a little like we might like to see in terms of being, for one thing, less binary, we can try that. And also just less emphasis on gender generally or preference so that it just wasn't a big deal. I guess basically what you do is you just take out mentions of it and they just live with it.
Yeah.
So they all say friend instead of sir or ma'am, or yeah, comrade would have been a little bit communist citizen,
Yeah.
but friend, yeah. And there, I guess there were titles in terms that prince and princess were in there, so there's that. I guess that was a lingering
Okay.
leftover part. But yeah, or the pronouns or something. I talked briefly with my editor about that. Like there had been a little bit of explanation that it was totally fine on this island to be like that, and she was like, I don't know if that we need to make it a thing that you know that gender fluid people are a thing here. Do we need to mention that? I was like, probably not. You're right. So yeah, we lifted that out, and I think that works fine for most people, and they can
Yeah.
just sort of think about whether it would be that big a deal to live in a world like that.
Do you
So
have sensitivity readers, or do you have people helping you like make sure that you're not your own biases or blind spots aren't keeping you from seeing things?
yeah, at least one of my beta readers is really up on that. And she's like a 20 something and gender fluid and is very much more into what modern sensibilities are about and was so patient with me doing all these Facebook messages back and forth. Like, so okay, so then do you think it would work if and she would talk me through it and bounce ideas off. And so I owe a lot to her for
Yay!
that.
What's her name?
Uh,
Give her name.
yeah, I've been worried that it would be
Oh yeah.
offensive somehow, but then I think if you don't make it an issue, if you don't make it the point of the book, people aren't going to be as offended. since it was not the point of the book. It wasn't like, I'm writing a book about transphobia or something.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. It's not about that.
It's just
So
a
they were
character
just
who
there.
happens to be gay, and there's a character who happens to be they, and they're just characters. They're people, just
Yeah.
people.
It's not a deal.
Right?
There's no coming out. It's not a thing.
I think that that's a really good way of doing it.
I'm glad I did it that way this time. It had been more of an issue in All the Better Part of Me. That was an actual book about coming out and being afraid of coming out and things like that. And people were more upset about that because it hits closer to home, and like, who gets to write that story? Do you get to write that? They don't know if I get to write that story, or I don't know. So I do sometimes feel like that was a mistake. I shouldn't have even done that. But then again, some people said it resonated. So
but I think that goes back to what we were talking about when I was pointing out that I screwed up my video already. That how would you know if you didn't try it? Like, now you know. And I think that like one of my aims is I think that writing has helped me give people more grace in their own mistakes, because I make so many. And then that.
Yeah, and I feel, you probably too, you feel worse too when people totally blast some book for making some perceived mistake, because like, I think I could have been that writer, right? If I had not known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. So tell me, we talked about your process of the overall book. What about your daily or weekly, like a daily? Do you write every day? Because I don't. But if you do write every day, then what's your daily? And if you don't, then what a writing day? What does a writing day look like?
I mean, I have 2 kids, and they're at home doing online schooling. So or if it's not a school day, they're still here. Yeah. And yeah,
Oops, are you gone? Is she gone? Come on back, Mom.
And I've also been taking a course via UW's online professional education, which is for editing. I'm earning a certificate in editing. So sometimes I have homework in that. But actually, that's also been really good for writing, because you learn some self-editing skills with that, and how to navigate the Chicago Manual of Style. But these days, if I'm not in the middle of editing something or otherwise have appointments for the kids or whatever, I do try to write, at least at this current stage, it's like outlining or maybe doing a little bit of the early draft for a couple hours a day. That'd be lucky.
So that's for the book that will come out, because what's the name of the book coming out in May?
Oh, Sage and King.
Sage and King, that's right.
It's more of a novella, and
we disappeared. Are you still there?
I just do this as a bit because it's way simpler.
Okay. Either, I don't know if the recording will show that you disappeared, but you disappeared to me. So you were saying Sage and King.
Oh yeah, sorry, it just caught up. That it's ebook and novella only, or ebook only novella, which was actually my idea for it. As it's a novella, and is it okay if we just do this as an ebook, because that's so much simpler?
Yeah,
it saves a lot of time for everyone if you don't have to format and distribute a print book.
Do the back cover blurb. Of course, you don't mind blurbs, but blurbs. I'm working right now with my cover artist for my next book, and I have to do this giant brief on the characters and the story and everything, and then it's like, and what's the back cover description? I'm like, I'm not even done writing the book, can we just do that later?
No.
So, but if you don't have of course you have to do it for the
like
description
for
page.
Amazon or whatever.
Yeah, but for the back cover,
no actual, you don't have to actually do the layout. Yeah,
right.
There's not actually all that print layout to do. It's mainly work that my publisher would be saved, but I did want to save her a lot of the work too, because you start feeling guilty when someone's putting out that much work for you.
Oh my gosh. Well, we should.
You just did a book for me.
But that's what they're paid for. So,
I know they get to share in the glory and all that, and it's and profits and glory. So it's still, there's a lot of work, and it's a small press, and she does practically everything. It's pretty amazing.
And if people do something well, you want to make sure that you treat them well, because you want them to stick around. Talk to me about writer's block. Has it been
40 minutes and it's kicking us? No,
because it's just the two of us, so we should be able to go on past. We're on on Zoom,
That was
everyone.
good.
Um, I was thinking the other day about like how many things I've learned that I didn't know before the pandemic. Zoom is at the top of the list. And like, what's
Yeah,
talking about?
now it's a thing.
Yeah. Talk to me about writer's block, because I tell people I don't believe in it. I don't. But what do you think about writer's block? Now,
Yeah,
now
I
that I've
feel like
tried it.
it's yeah, I'm there. Or am I there? It's I feel like it's usually a case of you don't know what you truly want to write, or you haven't decided on what you truly want to write. And it might be that you've locked yourself into thinking that you have to finish a certain thing and you really don't want to. And I could see maybe that's why I am backing off from sequential series, because I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to feel like I'm obliged to write this book and I don't even want to anymore. I think that could probably make you feel pretty blocked. I want to be free to write the next cool book that I had in mind. But even with that, yes, I think not plotting enough ahead of time often can lead to also feeling like you're stuck because you don't know where it should go next. So if you know where it should go next, start putting words down one after the other, even if they're stupid words. You can fix that later. And then it usually can get on by. So yeah, as you know, a year like this one, a season like this one, can really test the resolve of just focusing on a story, or the ability to focus at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think also that when I think about writer's block, I think it's a couple of different things. Largely fear, because I was thinking writing isn't hard, but it can be scary. Like, especially in the early stages when you're writing your first or second book, and
Yeah.
you're still worried about what are people going to say, what are people going to think, are they going to judge me for that? And so,
Yeah.
and again, that goes to exactly what you're saying, is just write something. You don't have to publish it, you can edit it out. It doesn't, but just
Mhm.
write something.
Yeah, in some ways that gets worse after you've published a few books, because now you know what people might say. Now you know how daunting it might get,
Yeah.
and that there are issues that you were totally blind to that were going to offend someone, it turns out, or something like that. And so yeah, suddenly you paralyze yourself by being like, no, but they won't like that,
Yeah.
so I should do this other thing. No, but they won't like that. And okay, should it be a female? No, they wouldn't like a female doing that. Okay, should it be a male? Then you don't have any female characters. Yeah, there's all kinds of things I can lock myself out of if I only think about the person out there who's going to be offended or mad about it. So I really have to try to not think about that. That's definitely one. Or just fear that I'll start it and I'll get so far into it and then I'll realize that the whole thing is just stupid and I'm gonna have to start over. So maybe I should plot it better first. Maybe I should spend more time planning, because then it won't be stupid. And I don't know if you can ever guarantee that. So
Well, and I was listening, there's a guy, Chase Jarvis, who's a creativity guy, and also I agree with him. So I was listening to myself as well. But I think that it is so easy. I'm sure writers who, or people who want to be writers, who are busy going to conferences and busy taking classes and busy, not that, I'm not saying you're bad for taking a class, because
no, the editing is like for other work, really.
yeah, but
Yeah.
people who just get stuck in not writing their book, but they feel like they're making progress because they're going to writing conferences all the time and they're,
Mhm.
doing all the research. Or I know someone who was um, writing in the margins of books that she wanted to emulate. Like all she would do is read these books and then write, oh, this is what that person did, which has value, but at the same time, you can't edit a blank page. As I think, is it Jodi Picoult or Pam Houston? Someone said, like, you have to have something written
Yes.
down to edit.
Yeah, exactly. You can't really substitute for the experience of writing practice itself. And because that's, as soon as you start, you're going to realize, wait a sec, I didn't think about this and this and this and this. But that's okay. You keep doing it, you keep working on that. Yeah, and it does seem like that. Like there are writing podcasts and things I listen to, and then I look up those writers, and like I've written more than they have,
Right.
probably because I'm not spending a lot of time keeping up a writing
Right.
podcast.
Yeah.
Which is really great that they're doing it and they're very successful at it, but it looks like they're not actually finding enough time then to just write novels.
Yeah.
So I do wonder about that sometimes. Like maybe this marketing yourself thing is just a really big waste of time.
Well, I'm trying again anyway. But no,
Yeah, I like this kind, but like doing it as the full-time job
yeah.
of I'm going to write about writing or talk about to most of my time is, yeah, I start wondering, when are you writing?
And I
Yeah.
like to be careful or warn people to be careful about people who tell you, here's how to make money writing. But the way they made money writing was by telling people how to make money writing.
Yeah.
Never actually wrote a book that made money other than the book that told people how to make money writing.
Yes. That they right, their bestseller is about a plot, how to plot something maybe, as opposed to their actual novels in which they plotted something presumably.
Right.
It's also, I guess it's just hard to get noticed in the novel world. We all know that.
It is. It is. Although, yeah, we just keep trying.
And everyone wants to write something and everyone wants help writing
They
something. So,
do.
yeah.
Yes. Do you have people
So
coming
I'll
in
be an editor helping people do that.
do you do a lot of that?
I've done a certain amount this year than previously. Some of it was actually like through this small press that I work with. I asked the publisher, I said, if you want me to try for like kind of cheap to proofread something, that would get me started. And she was willing to do that. So I got to proofread some whole novels and did some looking up even of details now and then. And that was a really good experience. Yeah.
That just made me think of fact checking. You probably didn't have to fact check anything in Lava Red Feather Blue because, which is one of the reasons I love
Well,
fantasy. But
there were details now and then that, like which countries would have been out in boats in the Pacific in the 1700s. And okay, I guess that was mostly the Spanish, the English, and the Dutch. Found that out, but then I did want it to be more, to not just be European. So I said that, I'm going to say the Hawaiians came up in boats and that people from Asia came over in boats because that seems likely enough. But yeah, I did little bits of things. And the main thing I was looking up was, since Larkin is technically from the late 1700s and has been awoken from his sleep in the modern day, I wanted his speech to sound archaic enough that it would be believable that he's from the late 1700s without going full Jane Austen
yeah,
or full founding fathers.
yes.
But I did look up, my dog is under my chair now.
Hi, Dog.
I did look up, I had like the Gutenberg texts of a couple of Jane Austen novels and the memoirs of Benjamin Franklin, so that I could sometimes just run a quick search on a word or a phrase and see if anyone was using it at that time.
Yeah.
If not, I would try to find a different one. So that was the main thing I looked up, and that's just because I'm a linguistic weirdo and I like speech things to be somewhat accurate.
Yeah. I think that because having things be accurate even within your fiction books makes it fun. I mean, like it
Yeah,
grounds it, it pins it to what we do know. I don't know. I like it.
yeah, yeah. I want it to feel lifelike, and yeah, without going total Regency dialect, which would have been a little dense probably. And anyway, they're not in England. It didn't have to sound like Regency England. It was a totally different place.
Right.
But
It's your own
yeah,
island. So do you think that you want to write books forever?
I kind of think so. Yeah. I may end up taking breaks between sometimes. I appear to be in something of a break right now since I haven't gotten very far on the next one. But
It's a hard time.
it kind of feels like I need to see if the world's gonna end
Right?
next week or next year
Right.
before I know if I should bother.
I know. But
But that's a stupid excuse because it's probably not going to end. So I still have to do something. Yeah.
but that's an interesting point because I'm in the middle to end of a book and people shake hands and things. And have you thought about like whether or how you would write the pandemic into a book as a current or as a past, like that it happened or that it's happening, either?
Good question. Right now, I absolutely don't want to write about it, but I could see that in decades future, I might be like almost nostalgic and be like,
Ah,
I could set something then.
yeah,
Well, the same way that now, if you write it in the 90s, set in the 90s, it's like vintage.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's nice. So maybe in the future. And as it turns out, we set Lava Red Feather Blue in 2020. in fact, in March of 2020 or spring anyway, of 20, and there's no mention at all of COVID in it
Yeah.
or Brexit or anything like that. And yet I figured I don't think anyone minds that I left those out and decided that this is
Yeah.
a universe in which we didn't deal with that.
Yeah, no, because I did notice. I was like, oh, it's current, but there's no pandemic. But it's a different island with different rules, and you just kind of say, well, they don't have a pandemic there because they're all isolated and they don't have to worry about the masks, and they can't fly there anyway.
They might not have even gotten it, and if they did, the
Right?
Fae would have like banished something as stupid as that from their island. So
There you go.
they have better healing. What with magic, maybe it wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah. Do you need to show your dog? I know that some of your fans love your dog.
Really? Okay, he's right here. He's itching on the bed. Come here.
Because I was going to say, I can hear him.
Yeah, he was getting in the way anyhow. So
There
he is.
What's his name?
This is Ramsey.
What's his name?
Hi. It's a corgi.
Hi, what's his name again?
Ramsey.
Ramsey. Was he named after Game of Thrones, or is
No. It was he's a Pembroke Welsh corgi, and we looked at the map of Wales, and there's a Pembrokeshire is one of the counties, and off the Pembrokeshire coast there was a Ramsey Island, so I picked that. Although my son also says that there is a soccer player from Wales called Aaron Ramsey, who we could say is named after. I don't know. Sounded like a good dog name. But yeah, we've watched The Crown, and we get really excited every time the corgis show up.
Right? There's so many corgis.
Get down. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ramsey, for showing up. All right. Well, what should people know about your writing? I will put up while we're doing this. This is your where to find Molly online.
Got stuff the dog hair on you.
Got some dog hair on you. What should people know about your book coming out? What should people know about about you, about your future? Just anything? Do you have a newsletter that they should join? What should we do?
They can sign up. There's a newsletter. If they go to my website, it should be down at the bottom of the front page, probably more than one page, where you can sign up. I don't send out emails very often, so it's not like spam or anything, but I'll certainly announce things like new books or awesome giveaways or any other fun things. I try to keep them sort of fun and vaguely writing and arts related.
And when is Lava Red Feather Blue coming out?
Its official release is January 5th, 2021. Right now it is already on NetGalley. If people are signed up for that, you can request to get an e-arc advanced copy to review. And we like that because it gets advanced reviews, especially if they're like librarians, and then they can order it for their library. That's a big plus.
I'm going to be doing a conversation coming up with some indie booksellers about how we can but one of the questions I want to ask them, because I don't know, like you can get ebooks from indie booksellers too, which I don't even know how that works, but you can do that. So
there's a site. Now I can't remember the name of it. I know that bookshop.org and IndieBound are set up so that you can order physical books through independent stores. But yeah, there is one, and the name is escaping me, but you can benefit independent booksellers by buying ebooks, which is great because Amazon is doing fine. We don't need to get everything there.
Well, I will find out more from the indie bookstores sellers when I do that. So, all right, well, Molly, I'm glad this finally worked out. I hope that the audio and the video turn out to be not hideous. So we'll find out. But thank you again. Everyone should go read Molly's current books. She's got tons of books out already that will get you primed to really enjoy Lava Red Feather Blue, coming out January 5th. 2021, assuming that the world is still around then. So,
yes,
congratulations.
Let's hope.
All right, well, thank you, Molly. You take care, and I'm gonna put your information up one more time. And thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.